You were taught that history is intact, complete, and trustworthy. That humanity's origins fit neatly inside the stories we inherited. But sometimes, in the quiet moments no one talks about, something brushes the edge of your awareness. A pull, a pressure, a subtle reminder that the official story is far too small. It appears in the most ordinary places. A hallway you've walked 1,000 times suddenly feels unfamiliar, as if the walls remember something you don't. A passing thought leaves a strange echo, like it didn't come from you but through you. Or a glance at the night sky stirs a memory you've never lived, a sense of presence watching from far beyond the stars. For most, these moments blur into the background and are quickly dismissed as imagination, but you've never been able to ignore them. You're one of the few who notice the seams, those almost invisible fractures where another story bleeds through. A story older than your culture, older than your language, older than human memory itself. And deep down, you've always felt it. Humanity wasn't shaped only by earth and time, but by contact, by visitors, by forces so ancient they were later recast as myth, angel, demon, or legend. Anything to keep you from recognizing their fingerprints. What you're about to step into isn't just another story. It's the hidden current behind the Book of Enoch, the Watchers, and the lost prophecy that shaped how humanity sees itself. Not the version preserved for the masses, but the one buried beneath silence, guarded by fragments of prophecy and forbidden visions never meant for public eyes. The fact that you're still listening means something has already awakened in you. Call it intuition, call it remembrance, call it the part of you that refuses to stay asleep. Because there is more, much more. And what waits beyond this point was never meant for everyone, only for those who can feel the pull. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast plain at dawn. The world holds its breath between darkness and light. The air carries a faint charge, subtle, electric, like something ancient is waiting just beneath the moment. In that stillness, you sense not a presence, but an awareness woven through the very air, older than scripture, older than the civilizations that tried to name it. That quiet pressure is where the forgotten story begins. For generations, humanity assumed our beginnings were simple, shaped by soil, guided by time, watched by a distant heaven. But across the oldest cultures, long before temples rose or doctrines hardened, whispers spoke of beings who walked the earth without belonging to it, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as observers, silent, luminous, waiting for a cycle to turn. Most imagine angels as gentle figures on stained glass, but the ancient world spoke differently. They described sentinels, watchers, positioned between realms, guarding the line where the human meets the cosmic. Neither gods nor men, something in between. A bridge carved from light and law. And that's precisely why their choice would change everything. Their decision didn't just affect a single tribe or age, it rewired the direction of human history itself. Why would such beings care about humanity? A clue hides in an old Hermetic fragment. As above, so within. Ancient mystics believed consciousness was a mirror. Whatever descended from higher realms left a mark inside the human mind. That's why stories of watchers appear in cultures that never met, separated by oceans, yet united by the same memory. An imprint humanity couldn't erase. But here's the turn no one teaches. Observation didn't remain observation. Something shifted, a boundary thinned, and what stepped through altered the trajectory of human history in ways we still struggle to recognize. Our ancestors tried to record it in carvings, symbols, fragments of forbidden prophecy, but most of it was buried, softened, or rewritten into safer stories. Yet the echoes remain. You feel them in those sharp thoughts that appear out of nowhere, in intuition that slices through confusion, in the clarity that rises when logic has run out of answers. Some call it divine intervention, others call it intrusion. But the truth is older, stranger, and terrifyingly intimate. Because the Watchers didn't merely witness humanity, they interacted with it. They altered it. And whether that alteration was a gift or a rupture depends entirely on which ancient account you trust. You've felt the pull because part of you already knows. This wasn't myth. It wasn't metaphor. It was contact. And what crossed into our world wasn't just presence. It was a force capable of accelerating human history far beyond its natural pace. And wherever that force touched, history didn't walk, it jumped. What if the greatest secrets of humanity were never lost at all, only hidden in the open, not in ruins or relics, but in the quiet rhythms of history, repeating like a coded pulse for anyone awake enough to notice? Across the ancient world, long before empires carved their borders or scriptures were bound, something strange kept appearing. Civilizations didn't grow slowly, they jumped. Stone shaped with impossible precision. Star maps charted with uncanny accuracy. Knowledge in metallurgy, astronomy, and geometry arriving not as gradual progress, but as if someone whispered the answers into human hands. Historians call it coincidence, but when the same coincidence surfaces across continents, the word loses meaning. Hidden inside the earliest writings, from cracked tablets to weathered scrolls, runs a single quiet truth. Humanity didn't stumble into knowledge. Something delivered it. Not to rule us. Not to save us. More like a spark offered to a species standing at the doorway of a wider reality. But the deeper you look, the more unsettling the questions become. Why did ancient scribes insist this gift came with a cost? Why did so many cultures describe beings who crossed boundaries never meant for crossing? Why did those encounters always carry the same tension? Like humanity was handed tools far earlier than we could understand. Imagine a village receiving fire for the first time, warm, illuminating, and capable of devastation in inexperienced hands. The ancients understood this duality. That's why their myths read like memories wrapped in poetry, and beneath those symbols, something real flickered. Some traditions recalled watchers descending with knowledge of the stars. Others spoke of teachers unveiling the secrets of Earth. A few warned of beings who shaped desire and perception, bending the inner world as easily as the outer. Different cultures, different eras, one unmistakable signature. This wasn't evolution, it was acceleration. And this is where the story splits. One version sees these beings as benevolent guides, offering humanity the keys to its own evolution. Another sees them as rebels disrupting a cosmic order, placing dangerous knowledge in mortal hands. But a third possibility, quiet and far more haunting, lingers underneath. What if they weren't united? What if some came to awaken and others to influence? What if early civilization was nudged not through force, but through information, shaping destiny from behind the veil? This fracture is what texts like the Book of Enoch tried to name, who the Watchers were, what they gave, and why their legacy refused to fade. Even the warnings about the Nephilim hint at a world altered by forces humanity wasn't prepared to grasp. Look at any era where human progress leaps forward unnaturally fast, and you'll feel it again, the same subtle pressure from beyond the visible world. And the deeper you follow that pressure, the clearer it becomes. Those early teachers didn't just reshape the outer world, they rewired the inner one. And that shift still echoes inside you today. Picture a room you've never entered, yet somehow you know its shape. The walls curve inward, the air feels heavy with memory, and a faint vibration rises through the floor, steady, almost like a heartbeat. You don't know if the room remembers you, or if something inside you remembers it first. That familiarity isn't imagination. It's inheritance. Human consciousness didn't begin as a blank slate. Something ancient was written into it. Subtle impressions, dormant abilities, instincts that feel older than your lifetime. And sometimes these hidden layers press upward, like a memory trying to break the surface. You've felt it before. The instant recognition with a stranger. The sense of returning to a place you've never visited. The certainty of knowing who's calling before the phone even rings. These aren't glitches, they're traces. Why do we long for the stars without being taught? Why do symbols we've never studied feel familiar? Why does intuition arrive with a precision reason can't explain? There's a line in the Corpus Hermeticum. The divine speaks in echoes within those who can hear. Mystics believe those echoes were remnants from a time when humanity stood closer to the forces that shaped awareness, not physically closer, but tuned closer. Whatever those early encounters were, they left a mark. The ability to understand suddenly, to sense beyond logic, to know without instruction. Most people brush these sparks aside, but you've always felt there was more beneath them, something waiting to surface. Here's where the story deepens. If consciousness carries old imprints, then the space between human and cosmic was never as wide as we were told. The Watchers didn't just share knowledge. They left a nearness, a subtle charge inside the mind that humanity wasn't fully prepared to use. That nearness awakened us and unsettled us. It opened inner doors long before we understood how to guard them. Some ancient texts call this the veiling, the moment higher awareness dimmed because the inner world grew loud, reactive, untrained. It's like giving a complex instrument to someone who doesn't yet know music. Even a gentle touch makes sound, but without understanding, the melody collapses into noise. That's what happened to early humanity. We received inner tools, intuition, vision, insight, before we knew how to wield them. And the charge left by that contact didn't disappear. It sank deeper, waiting for stillness or crisis to rise again. You felt these flickers, the sudden clarity, the knowing without reason, the sense that something in you is older than your name. They were never accidents, they were reminders. And the moment you recognize them for what they are, something else becomes visible, not just what lives within you, but what's been shaping you from the outside. If you trace the oldest surviving records, scratched into clay, carved into stone, whispered in fading dialects, you'll find something unexpected. Humanity didn't just inherit myths. We inherited warnings, quiet signals buried inside symbols, rituals, and coded language, as if our ancestors were trying to say something they were forbidden to voice. Across continents, one symbol keeps resurfacing, an eye half open, half sealed. Some called it the Watcher's Mark. Others said it was knowledge that looks back. But beneath every name lies the same truth. Humanity once perceived more than it does now. So what dimmed that perception? Not a loss of ability. Something redirected attention, slowly, steadily, away from the inner world and into survival, hierarchy, and obedience. The more humanity looked outward, the more it forgot how to look within. At first, it seemed like progress. Cities rising, order replacing wandering. But in the margins of ancient commentaries is a quiet accusation. The structures guiding early civilization weren't entirely of human origin. Some texts hint at subtle influences, entities shaping perception without ever appearing. Not through commands, but through stories, through suggestion, through bending attention, just enough that people stopped asking where certain beliefs came from. And when a species forgets how to see inwardly, steering it becomes effortless. This is why early scriptures and the esoteric schools that survived underground repeat a single warning: guard the gate of the mind, for forces unseen seek entry through the unexamined thought. Modern readers treat it as metaphor, but imagine it literal. Imagine ancient scholars watching humanity shift, not through invasion, but through currents shaping fear, desire, and worldview from within. Influence without fingerprints. Guidance without presence. That terrified them more than any physical threat. A sword is obvious, a whisper is not. So they hid their warnings in plain sight, inside geometry, initiation rites, and myths that appear harmless until you trace the code beneath them. Here's the twist. If influence can shape perception, awakening doesn't begin with fighting an enemy. It begins with noticing the parts of awareness that were trained to sleep. It begins with questioning the stories you inherited, the instincts you muted, the thoughts that feel planted rather than born. Because once you sense, not theorize, but sense, that your perception was shaped, not simply formed, everything you once assumed to be natural begins to look scripted. And in that moment, something ancient returns, the same pressure our ancestors felt when they realized humanity stood between two opposing currents, one that sparks awareness and one that prefers silence. And the question they left for us is the same one rising in you now. Who benefits when you forget who you are? Because once you ask that question, the pattern becomes impossible to unsee, and that's where the real story begins. If you look across humanity's oldest myths, something strange appears again and again. Different languages, different symbols, yet all of them describe the same divide. Two currents moving through early civilization, like opposing hands shaping the same clay. One current pulls upward toward clarity, inquiry, and the strength that comes from an awakened mind. The other pulls downward into confusion, dependency, and the soft fog that makes perception easy to guide. Ancient scribes didn't call this a war between monsters and angels. They said it was a tension inside the human mind, a struggle for attention, for belief, for the direction of inner sight. Humanity wasn't the prize. Humanity was the terrain. Some cultures remembered luminous guides who taught discipline and inner awareness. Others warned of influences that preferred humanity slow, predictable, and easily lulled. Different names, but the same underlying truth. Something external shaped the inner world. And here's the part most people never notice, that shaping never fully stopped. Look at the modern world. Constant noise, endless stimulation, a pace that keeps you reacting but rarely reflecting. It feels natural only because you grew up inside it. But you felt the crack in the rhythm, that moment when everyone nods to the same belief and something in you whispers, "This isn't mine." And that whisper matters, because here is the truth. History never says outright. Humanity wasn't merely influenced, it was calibrated. Calibrated to turn outward rather than inward, to trust noise over intuition, to stay so overstimulated that stillness feels uncomfortable and clarity feels foreign. Imagine early visitors leaving more than knowledge, leaving a subtle current woven into culture and instinct, gently steering attention for thousands of years. Not through domination, through suggestion. A current that rewards obedience. A current that discourages deep seeing. A current that teaches the mind to mirror the world's expectations instead of its own truth. Most people move through life carried by those currents without ever noticing, but you've felt the resistance, the inner friction that rises when the world pushes one way and something deeper in you refuses to follow. That resistance is the first sign of decalibration, because the moment you sense the shaping, it weakens. Ancient texts hint at a counterforce left behind by the luminous teachers. Not a structure, but a map woven into consciousness itself. It activates through attention, through awareness, Through the quiet moment, you recognize a thought that doesn't feel like yours and release it instead of obeying it. That is when the old influence begins to fracture. And once it fractures, even slightly, the forces that shaped early humanity are no longer steering the story. You are. If you feel that shift quietly rising in you, let it be known, softly, simply, I choose the higher current. There comes a moment in every hidden story when the veil stops protecting you and starts revealing you. And if you've followed the thread this far, that moment is now. Because once you begin to sense the forces shaping your perception, the old influence loses its hold. The ancient watchers didn't descend merely to teach. They came to awaken something, an inner capacity that, if remembered, could unravel every illusion built to keep humanity small. And when other forces realized what humans were becoming, the story was rewritten. Knowledge became myth, awareness became danger, history became a controlled version of itself. Yet the spark they left didn't die. It took refuge in the one place nothing could reach, your consciousness. Not in temples, not in bloodlines, in you. And that's the part responding right now. The truth isn't that humanity was shaped. The truth is that you can see the shaping. And the moment perception sharpens, the old influence begins to fall apart. This is why mystics hid their teachings in symbols, why prophets spoke in riddles, why the ancient texts preserved truth in codes rather than commandments. What awakens from within cannot be erased. So here is the final turning point. When doubt pulls at you, when heaviness rises, when confusion tries to cloud your clarity, understand this. You are not collapsing. You are recalibrating. Your perception is rearranging itself around something older, truer, and entirely yours. And when that tension appears, don't fight it. Do this instead. Place your hand over your chest. Feel the warmth, the weight, the pulse beneath your palm. Then whisper, out loud or in your mind, I am the one who sees. That small act is not theatrics. It is recognition. It is you choosing awareness over autopilot, clarity over conditioning, truth over design. And once you choose that, even for a breath, you cannot return to the version of yourself shaped by the world's noise. Because the story stops being about watchers or ancient forces or histories rewritten in silence. It becomes a story about you, your remembrance, your authority, your emergence beyond the old narrative. If something inside you stirred during this journey, if a layer lifted, if a memory whispered, leave a mark so others like you can find this path. Write one line, I remember the hidden spark. And if you want to keep descending into these forbidden layers of truth, like this video, share what opened in you, and subscribe so you don't lose the path that's unfolding. Before we close, take this mantra with you, softly or silently. I see through the veil. I rise beyond the design. I awaken the watcher within. This isn't an ending. It's the ignition.